In life and in football, sometimes you get punched in the mouth. Sometimes you pick a fight that you lose and you have to sit there and take a fat L in front of everybody. It's embarrassing, it's humiliating, and it's soul crushing. It can easily consume you and make you a creature of fear. That one single L can define you just as easily as it can be evaded. Remember, it's never that you take an L that defines you. It's how you respond that makes you. For the Cleveland Browns in week 2, they find themselves in that exact situation. Embarrassed and humiliated by Baltimore in week 1, this team finds themselves at the very same crossroads that they did at the beginning part of 2019. This Thursday, we get to see what this team's made out of. Are they going to fold and fall comfortably back into the void of irrelevancy that this franchise has called home for the last 20 years? Or are they finally going to take a stand that's 20 years in the making? Are they finally going to look mediocrity in the eye and break up with it? Well, let's talk about it. Real quick, if you're new here, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. Going to have a ton of NFL content during the season, so if you want to be checked in for that, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ding that notification bell so you don't miss a single thing. So if my intro didn't make the point clear enough, I think it's obvious that this week's game is much more than what it is on the surface, right? Just a week 2 division game on Thursday night against the Bengals. This game is really not about the win-loss record. Plenty of teams have recovered from 30-plus blowout losses to Super Bowl contending teams and have went on to achieve greatness. The Ravens went on a 12-game winning streak after the Browns blew them out at home last year. So it's not crazy to think the Browns can still have a good season after being drubbed by Baltimore. And that example goes to show you that what happened week 1 is really only as bad as the Cleveland Browns allow that loss to be. And it starts here in week 2. This is a big moment for this team to see what this team is made of. So let's talk some of the matchups and see what we need to see. First things first, Odell definitely needs a bounce back. 10 targets, 3 receptions is just abysmal. Cannot happen. Odell and Baker need to figure it out because this connection wasn't this bad. It wasn't this dissonant during the 14 days of training camp that it looked like it was in Baltimore. So they need to figure that out because it should not look that bad. It hasn't looked that bad. It's got to look a little bit better than that. How I think the Browns can achieve this, I think if the Browns focus on getting Odell easy yak targets at the beginning of this game, it's going to allow 2 things to happen. It's going to allow Baker Mayfield and Odell to get some confidence and get some rhythm because that's the 2 things missing from these two's game. Baker Mayfield doesn't have that confidence, doesn't have that rhythm that he used to have when he was out there. Same thing with Odell Beckham Jr. Doesn't have that confidence, doesn't have that rhythm. Just there's something missing between those 2. And I think getting some quick yak yards to Odell would do a lot to find that trust and to find that rhythm with both guys. And key in point, the only game where they did this consistently was against Miami, and that might have been Baker Mayfield's best offensive game in his career. So doing something like this, it has its basis in reality. It should work out, and the Browns need to do that. My second key, and this is just for the offense overall, is just honestly keep it simple. You don't have to make things complex. You don't have to overcomplicate things. You don't have to do fake punts on your own 30. Just keep it simple. Because what I saw last week that concerned me the most was that this offense, the game plan, the play calling, all of it really didn't look that much different from that Freddie Kitchens, Todd Monken mess. And hopefully this was just a one-game aberration of what they're planning on doing. That's what I hope it is. But if it's not, it's a massive problem, seeing that the biggest problem with the last coaching staff was exactly those things. Running backs being empty out wide, in shotgun most of the time, using no inline tight ends in a lot of formation, lack of play action. All of this stuff puzzled me because it's not what they did during training camp. It's not what they practiced all camp. But for whatever reason, that's what they felt comfortable doing against the Baltimore Ravens. I'm puzzled. I hope it was an aberration rather than a norm. There is some evidence to support that, but if it's not, that's a massive issue. So again, the Browns need to keep things simple. Keep Baker under center. Run the ball from under center. Chubb, Hunt. Use those guys to attack the edge of this Bengals defense when you run. and actually use your tight ends this game. You don't need an offensive explosion to beat the Bengals this week, but you do, if you're the Browns, need to make this game as physical as possible to beat the Bengals. The Bengals secondary, headlined by William Jackson III and Jesse Bates, is honestly a little bit too good to attempt to beat them with just finesse. We haven't seen that level of chemistry from Baker Mayfield and Odell to give me confidence that you can beat the Bengals with just finesse. So until that is the case, you're going to have to muscle guys. You're going to have to beat them with physicality. That's where your bread and butter has to be made if you're this Browns team. So you're going to have to play the time of possession game, and you're going to have to build your offense early on with these three pillars, right? Outside zone, underneath throws to both Odell and Jarvis so they can get some yak and get some rhythm going, and play action tight end seam concepts. That's how you're going to move the ball. Run, short passes, play action seam. That's really how you should be moving the ball against this Bengals team, because those are the three areas you know this team can dominate. You have evidence that you can dominate in those areas. You know you can do that athletically, physically, in all those areas. You know you can dominate. This offensive line was one of the few things on the offense that wasn't bad in that Ravens game last week. You put that with the fact that Mike Daniels and Geno Atkins are probably not going to play this week. That tells you exactly where you need to build, exactly where you need to attack if you're the Cleveland Browns. You need to try to outpower and outfight the Cincinnati Bengals this week. That's how you're going to move the ball. If they come out and they're trying to finesse this and trying to get deep and test Jesse Bates, they're going to have a bad day. You're not attacking the weaknesses of this defense. You got to attack the ground. You got to be physical. You got to push this Cincinnati Bengals team around a little bit on both lines of scrimmage. So that's really the plan of attack if you're the Cleveland Browns. Will they do it? That's a whole nother question, because they did not do anything that conventional wisdom says you would do against the Ravens last week. So we'll see, man. We'll see. Again, it's on the line. Defensively, this secondary and how they performed against the Baltimore Ravens was extremely concerning. Lamar had one of the easiest 3-touchdown days I've ever seen a quarterback have. And he did that mainly while taking advantage of this defense's lack of communication in zone. Go back and watch those highlights of Lamar Jackson tearing up this Cleveland Browns secondary. What you're going to see there is that most of those passes, most of those completions, most of those touchdowns were not even contested by a DB within the first, second of that ball getting to that wide receiver's hands. I don't believe the personnel is bad in this secondary, and I don't think any personnel grouping is so bad that they're going to play like they did against Baltimore. So this is not a personnel issue. This is an execution issue specifically in zone. It's been terrible all camp, and part of that reason is because the number one secondary was not healthy for the entire camp, and none of these guys really got chemistry with each other. So now, the week before the Ravens game, they're finally getting snaps. That wasn't enough. And since they're on a short week, I find it highly unlikely that they have patched these problems with this zone and with this communication in record time for Thursday Night Football. So if I were running the Browns defense, I would stick to man a lot more than you did last Sunday. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, look, you run man, you're going to fix the secondary, everything's going to look amazing, you're going to have one of the best secondaries in the NFL. No, that's definitely not going to be the case. They're still going to be able to move the ball in this secondary if they run man, but it won't be as egregious as it was last week with Lamar Jackson. And yes, running more man has obvious downsides when you're playing a quarterback who's mobile like Joe Burrow. He's definitely going to take advantage of that and scramble for some first downs. Like, that's going to happen. But that's more preferable than having A.J. Green, Tyler Boyd, John Ross, T. Higgins just run free in that zone like Baltimore's receivers did last week. And doing this will make the pass coverage not great, but slightly better. And if they're slightly better, that's going to be so much better for this defensive line. Because if we're being honest, this defensive line had some positives in week one. They stayed very disciplined on the read option, especially on stretch run plays. They did not get beat on those. And with Cincinnati already having a bad offensive line and a battered offensive line, Xavier Su'a-Filo is not going to play in this game. It makes it even more critical that you give your defensive linemen that extra second in order to get home. Because Myles Garrett, people are saying he had a bad game. He had 5 pressures. That's a lot of pressures for a defensive end. The problem was every time he got a pressure, somebody was wide open for Lamar Jackson to throw the ball to, so it ended up not affecting anything. When the wide receivers are wide open, the pressures don't turn into sacks. They don't turn into stops. They just turn into completions because the coverage needs to be better. And yes, the Browns are playing against the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Cincinnati Bengals do start Bobby Hart. And Myles Garrett should be moved to the right side to be able to take advantage of that. But I don't care how bad Bobby Hart is, unless Myles is getting there within the first 2 seconds of that ball being snapped, those pressures aren't going to turn into sacks or stops if that coverage is not a little bit better than it was last week. So my hope for this team is that they run more man, because I think Bobby Hart plus Myles Garrett, you're going to be able to get back there in the backfield and disrupt Joe Burrow, and that will be allowed to be more effective since you're running man, because you'll have Denzel Ward, Terrence Mitchell, Ronnie Harrison going up against A.J. Green, Tyler Boyd, and Uzama, and that might be enough to turn those pressures into stops. I think the defensive line has an opportunity to play really good here. Larry Ogunjobi had a very solid week 1. Sheldon Richardson was up and down, and Olivier Vernon was Olivier Vernon. You should be able to take advantage of this offensive line for the Bengals, and that's where, if you're the Browns and you're a Browns fan, you need to see this team dominate. If you don't dominate along that defensive line, Joe Burrow will have enough time to dice you apart. He's proven he can do that. You don't want to allow that to happen. So my final conclusion is that the Browns need to play this game and win this game by being as physical and as dominating as possible along both lines of scrimmage. Use the offensive line's advantage against Cincy's D-line this week to your advantage. They have injuries, take advantage of them, run the ball down their throat. Defensively, play more man, because I think if you're playing more man, you'll have more time for Myles Garrett, Larry Ogunjobi, and maybe even Olivier Vernon to get home against what is a little bit of a porous offensive line for the Cincinnati Bengals. If you take advantage of those areas, if you don't come out playing like you did last week, where you're in shotgun most of the time, where you're not running your offense, then you should win this game. My prediction, if they do this, is that they should be able to win 17-13. It's not going to be the sexiest win in the world. Some people are even going to be disappointed, because I think a lot of people are underrating how good Cincinnati is this year. But 17-13, you get the win. You go into the long weekend not having to think about that Ravens loss all week, and then you can go on and try to get everything together during that long weekend before you play the Washington football team. But that's my thoughts on what should happen this week. What do you think should happen this week? What do you think the Browns should try to do? Do you think they should pound it down Cincinnati's throat, or do you think they should try to get more finesse in? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.